Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. The US Congress has passed Trump's Big Beautiful Bill despite Democrat Hakeem Jeffries' attempts to delay the process. Sean Diddy Combs is denied bail by a New York judge after being convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution. And dead at 28, a Liverpool football star Diego Jota is killed after a car crash in Spain. His club say they are devastated by the news. The Republican-led US Congress has narrowly passed Donald Trump's flagship spending bill after a marathon voting session on the package. It's set to slash social welfare programs and add more than $3 trillion to the national debt. The vote had been somewhat delayed because of a Democratic-led debate by minority House Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who spoke for more than 8 hours today. To discuss this and all of today's stories, I'm joined by correspondent and columnist Gemma White and Shane McGinley, news editor at Arabian Gulf Business Inside. Shane, let's start with you. We just heard the news before coming on air, of course, that this mega bill, it's passed. Did it ever look like it was in doubt that this wasn't going to happen?
Well, I was going to predict before, when we were talking about when it was looking like the bill was coming up, that it's likely it will go. I was kind of hoping it wouldn't, to be honest, or it would be. It was only like there was a lot more sort of in it than I thought. I thought it might be like the Senate, where there might be just like a single person who had hold the sway vote. But my opinion kind of on it is that I don't think all of the issues that were lumped into one bill should have been put through. I think they should have been sort of compartmentalized and they should have been divided up. So I think there was too much in this bill for it all to go in one go. Like if you're talking about medical care, you're talking about taxes, you're talking about energy. I think all of these should have been decided individually, and I think that the system of lumping them all into one mega big beautiful bill is a little bit redundant now, I think, in modern politics, and I think it would favour maybe the British system or sort of the European system of looking at everything individually. So yes, it's gone through, and it's sort of the mandate that Trump has is now being it's going to be put into reality. But I think we need to look at the wider system, and I don't think it's very efficient.
And that's really interesting because there were days of debate and delay over this bill. So I think a lot was put in, and then obviously it went to the House of Representatives, back to Congress, back to the House of Representatives, so they could redact certain issues from that bill and then also further go on to make the decision. Yeah,
and I think a lot of that was covered by Mr. Jeffries, who has now, I think, set the record for the longest speech, like 8 hours plus, which has proved futile, unfortunately, for him. And I think there was always the belief that the votes were there. And I think, like we said, Trump was voted on a mandate from the American people to bring all of these issues in that he was clearly said he was going to implement. So I think if it hadn't gone through, it would have been a little bit of a democratic deficit. So I think it was always going to go through. But I genuinely think like those number of serious issues should not be lumped together in one. They should be debated individually, and there's enough time and effort for that to be done in modern American politics, I think.
Do you think it's lumped in to make it more complicated, like for the average person to understand it?
Yeah, I think so that you can kind of focus on the key issues that are popular and have populist issues, like, for example, like taking taxes off tips. Who's not going to vote for that? But then I think the medical elements of it should have had their own separate debate, and I think that's something that people may live to regret. And also the cut on food benefits, which apparently is going to impact maybe like 40 million Americans. So I think these are like really, really serious issues, and I don't think they should be all lumped together and just say yay or nay on one vote. I think there's the bandwidth in modern politics to debate them individually, and I think that would be a much fairer system. and I think it would be a more sensible system, and I think other countries managed to do that. Or if you look at sort of like the UK system, where you have a budget that comes in, and that's decided, and then you can debate all the issues. But I don't think this bill should have ever really been practical, or should have really been implemented in the manner that it was.
But the reality is it's the first major legislative victory for Donald Trump in his second term.
It's an endorsement, basically.
Yeah, it's huge for him to get through what he campaigned on, and this is what his MAGA base essentially, like you said, voted him in on. But as we said, it's just proving very divisive all the way through, from the House to the Congress, back to the House. Yeah. And even Trump's own party has been pretty split on this.
Yeah, for different reasons, really. So in the beginning, there were 3 Republicans who were very vocal about it. That was Tom Tillis of North Carolina, Susan Collins of Maine, and Rand Paul of Kentucky. Now, interestingly, ultimately, none of those voted against. That was Thomas Massie of Kentucky and Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania. But initially, the opposition was the cuts to the hospital funding. Now, this was from quite rural states as well, where you have these rural hospitals that are, they need the funding. Medicaid cuts, and then Rand Paul of Kentucky, his main concern was the national deficit, which has obviously been, vocalised by quite a lot. Now, Trump did take to Truth Social to issue what we can only see as threats against. He would threaten to campaign against any lawmakers who voted against the bill. And this came as Elon Musk was basically threatening the opposite. He was saying, I will fund anyone who runs against these lawmakers who voted for the bill. So much confusion and so much back and forth on social media as well as kind of clouded a lot of the issues. But interesting, Tillis, Senator Tom Tillis, he has announced his retirement literally the day after he kind of took Trump to task over, a lot of the things in this bill. So, yeah, Trump's come out the winner.
So I guess Trump has come out the winner. The bill has been passed, but obviously with not... I feel like the Republican Party and the MAGA base have been so strong, and this was the first time we sort of saw cracks in the armour happen, like you said, a resignation. But I guess for Donald Trump now,
it's an endorsement,
he's
completely.
singing.
But I kind of think like the figure you gave of $3 trillion that it's going to add, before we came on air, just before the IMF came out and said that this was one of the reasons that it was a really bad idea, and they've said that the IMF said that we have been consistent in saying that the US will need to reduce its deficit, and I think that is a fair point, because if you just keep adding on to more of the deficit, then you're just and the reason that some of it is going to be a deficit is because you're giving tax breaks and you're taking taxes off overtime and tips. So if fundamentally, then you're just repaying the deficit and all of these debts to future generations. So you're just pushing the can further down, and I don't think that's economically a very sensible idea. And it's going to be when Trump's out of power anyway. So I think, it's great for the moment, but you need to think long term. And I don't think so. I think there's a lot in this bill that will. People will regret, and when the IMF is saying it, then you've got to take it seriously, I would always say.
But it's also interesting because the US administration will push back on that and say we're reducing the deficit because of the US tariffs on trade. We're bringing more manufacturing back to America. So there's a double-edged sword when we look at it.
The Treasury Secretary said the same, and he was saying that actually all of these things and the one big beautiful bill will spur additional US economic growth, and it will boost revenues. But that's, again, talking about into the future. So, that doesn't really sound like sort of much planning in my book. If you're just saying, it'll lead to growth. Well, how? And if you look at the immediate impact of the tariffs, it's come out, the deficit is getting wider. So I think a lot of it is sort of saying everything's going to be rosy, which is a lot of what the Trumpian sort of secretaries do say. But we need to see evidence of this, and so far there's not seeing a huge clarity on it, I don't think.
But I have just got some news in. Now that the bill has passed the House, it will be on the president's desk next for the official signing. And the White House says President Trump will sign it at a ceremony on the 4th of July. So tomorrow there will be a signing ceremony. And Caroline Leavitt, of course, the White House press secretary, has put on social media one word. Can you guess what that word is?
Victory.
Yes! Oh my gosh, both of you got it right. Okay, victory at the White House. Thank you so much for your thoughts on the big, beautiful bill. Let's go on to another story now. And Sean Diddy Combs has been denied bail by a New York judge after a jury found the music mogul guilty of transportation to engage in prostitution. Combs was acquitted of the more serious charges of racketeering and sex trafficking by Judge Uran Subramaniam, said he must remain behind bars until his sentencing because of his history of violence. He will be held at the same federal jail in Brooklyn and is due to be sentenced on the 3rd of October. Shane, we got the news out yesterday on what he was charged with. We discussed this yesterday, Gemma. And then quite late into the evening, he wasn't given bail. And I think that was a little bit of a surprise to many because he seemed to really celebrate in court. But, you know, the reason for this is his violent history, and the judge doesn't feel convinced that he could be safe.
Yeah, and he said, and also his disregard for the rule of law and propensity of violence, so, which I think is fair enough. But usually you don't get bail if they're worried that you're going to be a flight risk. So I think that's quite unusual. Like, you know, if Diddy or Puff Daddy or what is he going by now? A Love?
Diddy, yeah, I think Diddy now.
I think if he showed up for an airport, or, you know, everyone's going to recognise him. So I think they're just trying to make a point in this by not giving him bail. And I think he's looking at like 20 years, and like you said, it's until October 3rd. So, I genuinely hope that he does get sentenced. I know you probably shouldn't really say that, but I think it will set a precedent, and then maybe there's going to be plenty of other celebrities in watching this who are probably thinking, you know, am I going to be next? And I think it will encourage victims to come forward. And I think if he doesn't get it, then the opposite will be true.
Because, Gemma, I think yesterday when we found out that he was found guilty on 2 of the lesser charges, he got away with 3 of the stronger charges against him. It was a little bit of a shock. And I think a lot of us had seen those videos of him beating his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. And I think people expected a harsher verdict in many senses. But have any celebrities been coming out discussing, you know, the verdict and how they feel about it?
Yeah, there has been celebrity reaction. But interestingly, for me, it's the kind of celebrities that I would expect to react, you know, so people who are already involved in advocating for victims of domestic violence or sexual assault. There is a lacking in, air quotes, big names coming out and speaking out against him. Now you've got 50 Cent. Now 50 Cent and Diddy have been, you know, sort of back and forth for years. They don't get on. So obviously 50 Cent was very gleeful over Twitter. You've got Kesha, who's obviously had her own experience. She accused her producer of sexual assault. She said, "Cassie, I believe you, I love you, your strength is a beacon for every survivor." We had Aubrey O'Day. Now, she was in the reality TV show Making the Band, which Diddy created, and he created the band Danity Kane. And she has spoken out a lot about her experiences. And she said, and I completely agree with this, she said the cultural weight of this decision is immeasurable. And you see, this is where I think we might disagree, because I think it will stop, the verdict will stop more women coming forward, because they've seen this rich, powerful man. Fine, he's had 2 charges, but as we all know, the bigger charges he was not found guilty of. And we already know the process of, you know, if you're going to, you know, accuse someone or come, you know, of sexual assault, the cards are already stacked against you. No,
and I couldn't agree more. And you have to prove beyond reasonable doubt, and racketeering is a difficult thing to prove beyond reasonable doubt. And I think that that's what a lot of people were saying. You know,
like
the prosecution took it but once again, difficult.
Well, I think, yeah, some of the celebrities were saying, I don't want to name the names because we get sued, but they were saying about that, you know, the jury didn't believe the women. But I kind of think, one, the prosecution's job is to go for the highest sort of charge possible, and then, you know, see what the jury agrees. But obviously the jury looked at the evidence and decided there wasn't sufficient evidence, and it has to be based on evidence. So it's not a case where, like, they're saying, oh, we don't believe the woman. What they're saying is that we don't believe there's sufficient evidence to back up him getting charged with this, which I think that's how the rule of law should work. So, but he has been charged with 2 cases and could potentially get 20 years. So I think that's still a result, and I think that would probably still encourage people to come forward if he does get the 20 years. The fact that he didn't get the 2 more serious crimes, like I said, there's just not the weight of evidence to justify that. But I think still getting charged and going to jail is enough of a cultural shift that I think it would encourage maybe potential other victims to come forward. Do you not think?
No, I don't. I think the system is stacked against women already. And we know as well that so many cases go unreported. And the backlog of, you know, sort of, say police stations have rape kits and things like that, but the backlog of testing, we know that can be like often years.
So what do you think needs to change to make it easier for victims? Do you think they should be kept anonymous then, so they don't get the
I
media
think
backlash?
we need to change the concept of what a victim looks like. You know, what the jury saw, they saw a lot of the text messages between, you know, the Jane and Cassie, the lady called Jane and Cassie with Diddy, saying that they had a great time last night, that they enjoyed what was happening. And you could look at that in black and white and say, oh, this woman enjoyed what was happening. But what we know now about how victims react, how they might be so afraid of someone that they'll say anything to try and protect themselves, there's no room for nuance at all in the courtroom.
And it was really interesting because Cassie Ventura, in some of her testimony that she gave, she did say that if she didn't answer a phone within 15 minutes, Diddy would send people to go and make sure she was there or where she said she was.
Or if the expression on her face wasn't what he thought it should be, he would become angry with her.
And violent. So I think, once again, that's the conversation. You know, we can say a lot in black and white, but the racketeering charges were to try and sort of make that window into what was happening wider so people could get the overall sense of it.
But there must have been more people that knew what was happening. Like, I looked at the BBC and it had all of the text messages and all of these hotel rooms that were completely sort of trashed and needed baking soda and stain remover and all these kind of things. You know, these things don't go unseen. So the amount of people that would have known about this, and also his first sort of violent incident was back in 1999, and it was a record executive at a video shoot. Like, so there must have been like potentially hundreds of people that knew about this. So I think it needs to be more of a whistleblowing sort of exercise. So I do kind of think if he goes to jail, people will say, okay, I didn't know about that and I didn't do anything, so I should have come forward 20 years ago. So maybe that would be the cultural shift, but it'll take a lot of time. So maybe there needs to be sort of whistleblowing incentives for people to come forward, because like all these hotel staff, all these cleaners, all these personal staff, you know, I'm not saying they take responsibility, but somebody should have come forward. And like, I'm surprised TMZ never found out about this when, you know, we've got the video culture. So I think there does need to be a cultural shift of not just letting these incidents happen for like decades.
I think Cassie is actually suing the hotel.
Yeah.
So where that video was taken, I do believe that it was hushed up or it was purchased, and she's actually suing them as well. So, yeah, I mean, that's something, but...
And that's a difficult thing because obviously it's one of those things that's, it's a whole lot of culture that needs to change. But as we know, you know, he's been tried in court in front of a jury. He's been convicted on 2 charges. He's now remains in the jail in Brooklyn until October the 3rd. And then I guess we'll know how long he will or will not spend in jail. But it's a really interesting conversation. Thank you for your thoughts on that. Now let's move on to another story. The Dalai Lama, the exiled spiritual leader, has told his followers he will be reincarnated as the head of Tibetan Buddhism when he dies. The announcement comes after years of uncertainty and fear over whether he would be the last in a line of Tibetan spiritual leaders, stretching back centuries. However, Beijing says it can only choose the Dalai Lama's successor, and it has to be approved by the central government. Camille Nedelec reports.
In this city of exile, the Dalai Lama is thinking of the future, a future that puts Tibetan Buddhism once more on a collision course with China. Just a few days before his 90th birthday, the religious leader announced at an annual Tibetan conference that his foundation has the sole authority to approve his reincarnation.
They should consult the various heads of the Tibetan Buddhist traditions and the reliable oath-bound Dharma protectors who are linked inseparably to the lineage of the Dalai Lamas. They should accordingly carry out the procedures of search and recognition in accordance with past tradition.
The Dalai Lama has said his successor will be born outside of China because he doesn't want to be born somewhere he does not think is free. And he has told his followers to reject any leader chosen by Beijing. The 14th Dalai Lama fled Tibet after a failed uprising against China in 1959, and he's been living in exile ever since. Beijing views him as a separatist and says it will have the final say over whoever replaces him.
The Chinese government implements a policy of freedom of religious belief and has issued regulations on religious affairs and the management of the reincarnation of living Buddhas in Tibetan Buddhism, protecting this way of succession in accordance with the law.
Tibetan Buddhists believe upon the death of their Dalai Lama, the leader's soul is reincarnated into the body of a child. It's a tradition in Tibetan Buddhism that stretches back hundreds of years. After having previously said he might not be reincarnated at all, his followers are relieved that the Dalai Lama now has a succession plan in place.
It's very important. I feel his institute of Dalai Lama is continuous. Of course, it's very, very important. So not even for the Tibetan people, it's important for this Mother Earth.
The leader's 90th birthday on Sunday will mark the culmination of a week of celebrations. Camille Nedelec, Arabiya.
Now, the Chancellor of the UK, who cried during PMQs yesterday, has said she had a tough day and was dealing with a personal issue. The incident, which saw Rachel Reeves visibly upset in the House of Commons, sparked significant market reactions. UK borrowing costs spiked and the pound dropped as investors worried it indicated internal political instability. Gemma, oh gosh, yesterday, PMQs, how did this all come about?
So she said she'd had a tough day, but, you know, one could argue she's had much...
a tough year.
Yeah, a tough year. You know, it's not just a day. So this could be a culmination, everything that's happened. And as we talked about earlier, Prime Minister's Question Time can get very heated. It can get very aggressive. You know, it's not for the faint-hearted at all.
And it's like the gladiators, you know, it's basically the main political party, and it's, you know, the second party is to hold them to account. And it's meant to be that back and forth at the dispatch box, you know?
Yeah, so the notion of this being a perfect storm, and obviously there's been so many U-turns with regards to, you know, her budget. And there was the benefits cut vote, which has seen $5 billion taken from her savings. So, you know, she perhaps feels she's been undermined professionally. And then she's also talked about there also being personal issues. So there could be this culmination of things which have happened. There's also been mixed messages from the Prime Minister where she might not feel supported because he has not sort of said that he's guaranteeing her role. But then later he said she has his full backing. So again, you know, there's this roller coaster ride going on. But I think, you know...
But don't you think that is a bit ridiculous, though? You can't say to someone, oh, you're guaranteed your job for the next 5 years, because you don't know what's going to happen in the next 5 years. So he could just say, I'm not planning to fire at this particular moment. But expecting someone to say, yeah, she's going to stay in the job for 5 years is ridiculous, and it's just politicising it.
Yeah, I guess he doesn't want to lie, and that will
yeah.
come back to
No.
kind of haunt him.
Because they're all saying, oh, he didn't guarantee that she's going to be there for like years to come. And it's like, well, because he doesn't know.
But I feel like the relationship between Prime Minister and Chancellor, like they do last a long time, as
Yeah.
we've seen. You know,
Yeah.
people go like
God.
years and years together. So I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility for her to assume, oh, I'm going to be in this role for, you know, a long time.
I do find it interesting, though, and I don't know if, Shane, you're on this page with me at the moment, but...
Let's see.
Let's see what I'm
page
going to
are
say.
you on?
But I was just thinking about, you know, the fact that Keir Starmer has stood by her and obviously said a lot. But then if you look in the UK press, they're basically saying that the newspapers are implying that the Prime Minister was callous during PMQs. She was sitting behind him. She was crying. He didn't take any notice. He said, obviously, I'm at the dispatch box. I'm taking questions and debate from opposition. But then they've also said that he hasn't stood up for her in any speeches. You know, he hasn't actually been there. Yes, the party has really battled under this reform bill, barely scraped through. It's now going to cost them billions. Do you really buy the fact it's a personal matter, or do you buy the fact it's actually chaotic right now?
I don't buy that it's a personal matter. I think when they saw on the screen her sort of communications people thought, right, can we say it's hay fever? No, we can't do that. So let's just say it's a personal issue and that'll make it go away, which is completely naive, because I think if it was a personal issue, she shouldn't have gone in the first place and sort out the personal issue. And I think them saying it's a personal issue, they should just come out and say what it is. And I'm all for like people having that private life, but they've opened the can of worms and said it's a personal issue. If she just says, just for sake of argument, if it was like her mother got a health issue or one of her children was sick or something, I don't know, whatever you would class as a personal matter, then just say what it is, and then that'll make it sort of go away. But now it just looks like they're trying to cover up what was, and if you don't sort of feed the media, especially in the 24-hour news, then you create a vacuum, and then people will fill it with all the conspiracy theories. And I haven't read any conspiracy theories that I could say online anyway, but I'm sure there's plenty of them. And I think they should just come out and say, she got some bad news. And the reason they're not saying that is because I don't think that's true.
Yeah.
And I think it's to do with, she had the row with the PM, and there was issues, I think, with the speaker kind of reprimanded her. And then also when Kimmy Bednock said, do you support it? So there was, like you said, there was a whole cluster of things.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to should she have cried, I think no.
I absolutely do not think she should have cried. Oh.
It's just bad optics.
It's
like, you're
bad,
a politician,
bad optics.
you know it's all about optics. That meme is going to follow her for the rest of her life.
But you can see she's not like, I think she's trying not to. You know, she's very composed. When most people cry, they're not, you know, composed. But she is, I think she's really trying not to. She knows the cameras are on her. I don't think she's doing it.
Well, she said that today. She said, I had a really bad day, but the difference with my bad day and everybody else's bad day is that it's in front of the cameras. And, like, she knew the cameras were going to be there. Like, she's been in Parliament for a long time. So that was incredibly naive. But I personally just think I don't want my politicians crying.
But Gemma, I don't know, because I'm probably on the same page as Shane. One, I don't want my politicians crying, especially when this has been such a disaster of a bill, and the fact that they cut winter fuel allowance. They've had 7 U-turns in 1 year, and there's been pensioners suffering to make ends meet. There's probably been pensioners crying at home, you know, and now you're crying because people are criticising you because you've made bad decisions that people have been up against. But maybe I'm being unfair.
No, I agree. The optics are not great. You know, you're looking at someone in a position of privilege and power, and they have, you know, they did take the winter fuel allowance from pensioners. Absolutely terrible decision. And from that perspective, you might say, what do you have to cry about? You know, you've climbed, you're the first woman to climb to this top job as well. It's incredible. But I don't think this one, you know, this one kind of emotional, and it wasn't even an outburst, it was very small. I don't think she should be judged on that. And to be honest, I had a look at politicians who've cried in public. And we've got George W. Bush, we've got Gerald Ford, we've got Nixon, we've got Bill Clinton, we've got Obama, we have got Margaret Thatcher.
Why were they crying? Were they crying at like funerals or something?
There was quite a variety of reasons.
Like, do you remember Theresa May cried when she left?
Yeah, she cried.
Yes, she cried.
I don't think she should have done that either.
But so did Maggie Thatcher.
She cried when she left
cried
as well, yeah.
And they're leaving, so I think it's within context. But I kind of want my politicians to be steely and tough and be able to control their emotions, because they're running an entire country. And I don't think that was a tough day. Look, she didn't have to deal with COVID or anything. That would be a tough day. So it kind of worries me then that is she going to be able to handle it when it's something really, really big happens?
But like Gemma said, it's one bad day in the office, and sometimes...
But do you remember Neil Kinnock on the beach when he got knocked over
when
and
that
haunted him forever?
Yes.
So these little things, and even this day and age of memes, they'll go on and on and ever.
But her tears were a lot more realistic than Nick Hancock crying over COVID, when there wasn't even, moisture in his eyes. So this is legitimate tears, I think, and,
Also, I think it'll be sort of forgotten about quite soon. It'll move on. But every time she kind of has another tough day, this will be brought up again and again.
Yeah.
So if she has a good political record, she'll get over it. If she doesn't, it'll haunt her.
Or she comes out and says, this is the reason, and she comes...
Yeah.
It's a definitive reason.
Yeah, and gets ahead of the story.
Which is what we all want. If she just says it was X, Y, and Z, it was a family matter. But then also, I think if it was a family matter, she should have stayed outside of the Westminster and dealt with that. I still come back to it. I don't want my politicians crying.
Would her absence not have caused even more...
Yeah, I was thinking that. Yeah, it would have caused even more for
where is she?
wasn't
What's
there.
happening?
Yeah.
But then, what do you think of Kemi Badenoch? She's been described as having
really
zero
stuck her
empathy
knife.
about going for it. So part of me was watching them both, and I'm kind of thinking, and as you know, I do love a survey. There is a survey saying that when you see people cry in work, 74% of people then think empathy towards them, but then also think they're incompetent. So you can't really get away from that fact. And I kind of think that a lot of people will watch that going, the crying chancellor. And if Have I Got News for You was running, that would be like a running story, and it would become a joke.
But I have empathy for people at work if they cry, but if they're
But I bet you don't cry when you're
frustrated.
reading the autocue if you had a bad day.
No, I can't cry on air.
No.
I'm afraid I can't. But it's such an interesting debate because, like you said, it's one bad day. People do get emotional. It's very difficult. You and me probably feel, don't cry in the public arena, in PMQs, when it is a gladiator zone, and you've got to be standing up for your policies, your country and your party. But also, I agree with Gemma, the fact that, one bad day shouldn't ruin your whole career.
Do you think it could be generation as well? Like, younger generations, they're crying all the time on TikTok. I see videos all the time of people getting emotional. I think older generations are a bit more... I don't want to see that from my politicians, but... it could be a savvy move for Gen Z. Who knows?
She could have a brat summer.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's move on to our next story now. And the 28-year-old Liverpool forward and Portugal international, Diogo Jota, has died in a car crash in Spain. Local police say his vehicle suffered a blown tyre and left the road. Jota's brother, Andre Silva, also died in the crash. Liverpool FC say they are devastated by what they call an unimaginable loss. Gemma, really, it's an unimaginable loss. This is completely tragic. It's been dominating the news headlines today. A young footballer, what happened?
So, at the moment, there's not much information because obviously the authorities in Spain are getting to work. We know that he was in the car with his brother and the crash happened around 12:30 a.m. local time. He was in his Lamborghini. They don't yet know who was driving, but the first official statement has been released and the authorities believe that they were overtaking another car, or they haven't even actually said another car, they've just said overtaking, and a tyre burst, and it caused the car to crash and it burst into flames. Now, Jota was driving from Porto to Santander because they were catching a ferry back to England because he'd recently had surgery and he'd been advised not to fly. So that's why they were there and that's why they were driving. They were on their way to the ferry to come across to England for pre-season training. Now, the saddest part of it is that this young man got married 11 days ago to his childhood sweetheart, very much in love. They have 3 children together. They have 2 young sons and a baby daughter who was born in November 2024. And the last postings on his social media were just about this joyous day that they had. So that is, it's truly, truly sad.
Gosh, it's just harrowing, isn't it, that in a split second, like you said, posting about his wedding, and then a young family no longer has their dad, and the mother doesn't have the 2 sons too.
Yeah, it's very
but Shane, so many tributes have been really flooding in because, you know, Liverpool actually just won the Premier League, so they had been celebrating in many respects.
Yeah, there's a lot of high profile, you know, Ronaldo and so he came out and said that, you know, it doesn't make any sense. We've had sort of former Liverpool managers and players, and even the Prince of Wales and the Princess of Wales as well. And what I kind of thought was quite nice was that there was a lot of football teams around the world. I think even like Miami and some of the other European ones were doing like a minute silence. So in that regards, I would allow crying. That's perfectly fine. You know, I think that's perfectly healthy. But I think it is quite sad, and I think if there's anything to come from it, like, we don't know the reasons behind it, we don't know why. There has been some sort of speculation by unnamed sources in some of the media, but again, the authorities haven't obviously come out and said it was what it was. But if it is to do with speeding, I think that just sort of shows that, you know, no one is immune to it, and you know, maybe people should think twice before they hit the accelerator.
And I think that's a scary thing, right? We still don't know the ins and outs of it, and it's just a tragic loss. I'm sure we'll find out more about what actually happened in the days coming. But just, you know, the floral tributes, the people who've been visiting, like you said, football teams around the world holding that minute silence. And also, his funeral is due to take place on Saturday, so that will happen. But it's just sad, isn't it, if it's someone so young with such a bright future ahead of them.
One can imagine that's going to be a very big turnout. People are going to want to go along and pay their respects. Fans, you know, I presume it would be he's from Porto. I presume that that's where it would be, but I think you're going to see an outpouring of grief, and, you know, we see that these days, and I don't think it matters whether you're a Liverpool fan or not. This is a young family that's been, you know, absolutely torn apart, and I think anyone can feel empathy for that. So, yeah, I think that would be, the funeral is going to be very well attended by, you know, fans and people who just want to pay their respects.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you so much for your thoughts on that. And finally, we've reached that point in the show where Shane and Gemma, you tell us your quirky stories of the day. And I've lost my piece of paper, but oh yeah, Gemma, yours is interesting. I've got to it now. And I should have had ChatGPT, because that's what yours all on about. It's on about a story about AI.
Yeah, is there anything ChatGPT cannot do anymore? Because this is the latest. Now, the headline grabbed me because it said ChatGPT helps woman to lose weight.
Okay.
And I just pictured her sort of plugging her computer into, like, her stomach or something. So that was the kind of image I went in. But it's not that at all, by the way. Young women are now starting to use ChatGPT as a weight loss aid. So they are asking about to organise recipes for the day for them. They're asking about calorie deficit. They're even taking photos of their fridges, the contents of their fridge, and asking ChatGPT to rate the contents of their fridge.
So I quite like this idea, and the reason I like it is because I hope it will make people healthier.
Yeah.
Because what happens if it sees like a cake in your fridge and it's like, oh no, you don't have the calories for that today? So actually, it's holding you to account, which isn't a bad thing. And you use it, don't you?
Yeah, I do use ChatGPT for. I haven't lost that much weight, I have to say, but I'd use it more for glucose spikes and controlling that. So I do take a picture of my meals put it up to ChatGPT, and it tells you which order you should eat the food in for the best management of your
Does
glucose.
it shame you or just?
Well, if you ask it to, it will. But it's very good. It'll say like, oh, maybe if you don't have that or whatever it is in the omelette, but if you have that later, and if you have your melon last and don't have this, so it does really work, and it's to stop. I use it anyway. It's to stop having those carb comas that you get in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say, it has worked. So I'll check the scales later and let you know.
Oh my gosh, that's so interesting, because Shane, you're way ahead of me. I would never think of using something like ChatGPT. I'm still quite old-fashioned, you know. If I want to
scan the photo and tell you, okay, these are all the stuff that you have in your breakfast menu going on the photo you have, and then it'll put them in order and give you the reasons behind everything. So it is very efficient and very good.
Is so efficient.
I don't use it as much now because I've sort of just gotten the hang of doing it myself. But when I first started, it was really good. Some of the stuff I don't really buy, like if you've got a burger, it'll say take the meat out, eat the meat, and then eat the bun, which, like, what kind of cycle is going to do that, really? But,
Now, you've said it's efficient, though, but the detractors online, one in particular said, when they say that AI will make humanity forget how to think, this is what they mean. So there is efficiency, but there is also handing over absolutely everything in your life to ChatGPT to make every decision for you. So, yeah, there is that.
And Shane, let's go to yours quickly, because
it's the funniest
time is of the essence.
Yeah.
So the funniest countries, who's taken the top spot, and did ChatGPT do the survey, maybe?
No, they didn't. It was a survey of 6,000 people across 30 countries, and the #1 funniest country in the world is the Czech Republic.
Unexpected.
Can I tell you what, I was just thinking about that. I have a really good friend from the Czech Republic. I'm going to give her a shout out, but she's hilarious, and I never actually thought of that.
Yeah, and Portugal is #2, and Ireland is #3.
Right,
Oh, wow.
you're #3. I'm from the UK. I'm 18, which I am absolutely disputing. Where are you on the list, Leigh-Ann?
I don't know. I have no idea. Where's Zimbabwe on the list? It probably wasn't surveyed.
Zimbabwe did not make the list.
We didn't make the list. But I do think that we are extremely funny.
The USA is #29. Like, there's so many globally great comedians and actors. I don't really buy that. And because it did say what is funny, and it said sometimes I think of something that's so funny I can't stop myself saying it, even if it's inappropriate. And I'm like, is that funny?
Inappropriate stuff is funny.
It is really funny. But then I also wonder how you measure humour, because everyone has
so
such
subjective,
a different humour.
yes.
So, because some comedians you might love and I might hate. You know, it's strange.
Well, do you think this is funny? This was voted the best joke at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival 2024, and this was like the #1 of everyone who went to Edinburgh. And this is the joke. I probably won't deliver it. Probably. Here we go. And it says, "I was going to sail around the globe in the world's smallest ship, but I bottled it." There you go. Work.
That's good. I've got another thing. Why did the chicken get into the band?
Why?
Why? Because it crossed the road.
Because it had its own drumsticks. You know, it's just like...
Falling. That's why you're not on the list.
I know. But that's all from us on W News Extra. Thanks to today's guest, correspondent and columnist Gemma White, and Shane McGinley, news editor at Arabian Gulf Business Insight. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and also follow us on X. GNT with Tom Burgess-Watson is coming up next. Goodbye and thank you.